Good afternoon, good evening. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Relationship Talk with Tish. Grown folks perspective style, okay? Tonight, I have a special guest for you, and he is joining me now. Give me 1 second. Mark, click the plus sign and request to join the video, please. This is going to be a good one, ladies and gents. This is going to be a good one. Can you hear me, Mark? Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me okay? Can you give me a thumbs up in the comments if my sound is good? Mark, push the plus sign. There we go. So Mark should be joining any minute.
There you are.
There he is. You see, I'm dressed as a soldier for the Lord, okay?
I see.
How are you this evening?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
I'm blessed, all things considered. Thank you for your patience. Traffic was insane, but my babe got me home safely, so I'm thankful for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those who are not here, there will be some people catching the playback. I know that they're going to catch the playback because this is anointed by God. Okay. I want to introduce you guys to Dr. Mark here. Give me 1 second. I'll be reading from my iPad because I want to make sure that I give a proper introduction. Dr. Mark is a pastor, recently retired police officer, military veteran, and psychotherapist. He has a doctorate in marriage and family therapy and currently works with individual couples, families, and first responders to improve their mental health and overall quality of life. So when I tell you, we're going to bring you some good this evening. We are going to bring you some good this evening. We want this video to do a couple of things. We want you guys to know the great talent of Dr. Mark. Mark has so much to offer to the world. Mark has given his life to service, and there is a lot that we can all learn from what Mark has to share. The other thing is, and most importantly, we want God to get the glory. We want God to be pleased with us. We want God to allow something that we say tonight to resonate with someone, to potentially change someone's trajectory, to give them a different perspective. Sometimes we have such a negative image of therapy and just talking through things. We open our doors, we turn on the news, we can see that the world needs help. So this is just us doing our little piece. And if you allow me to say a quick prayer before we get started, we'll jump right in. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you. We say thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. We ask that you bless us to be a blessing and bring you glory. That's what we want to do here, Father God. The safest place to be is in your will. Let us align with that right now. Please forgive us our sins. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we are going to jump in. And the first thing I want to say is, I think it's good to share how we met. So Mark and I met, hello from Nigeria. Mark and I met at an unnamed place. We both worked there and we were hired for the sort of the same reasons. We were hired to essentially work together, but we had not met each other initially. And we were there to do racial equity work. And let's just say, I think it's safe to say, Mark, that we realized that, you know, we didn't want to put our name or stamp on anything that was just checking the box. And it kind of resulted in us just kind of parting ways. What you want to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people want or believe that they're ready for this racial equity work when they may not be. And in some organizations, there is a lot of internal work that needs to be done first before you try to become so ambitious with some of the other projects and goals that you want to do. And I think that this organization, I don't know that they were quite ready to.
And I think it's safe to say they were not. Minimally, they were not ready for us.
Right. Because, you know, we were bringing it hot, right? And, you know, it's a lot with it. And you really do have to be prepared for it. And one of the things that I think that has to occur is that you have to be able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And when you know this work is going to create some levels of discomfort, and if you're not ready for it, one of the easiest and quickest things to do is to bail. And so, you know, listen, I think that God's divine providence was that you and I would be there at the time that we were there. I do believe that for the short period of time that we were there, that we were able to be used by God to affect some change. And I think that the spirit that we brought still lingers because, you know, that's just what God does. And so I think our assignment was up when it was up. And I think that we accomplished some good things while we were there.
Yes. And we have maintained our friendship. It's been a little over 2 years now that we have been friends. He is now my brother. I told him, I was like, we're just not friends or coworkers. This is my brother. Right. Yeah. And so I must preface our discussion with Mark is also not available. So Mark has the blessing of having been married just under 40 years.
Yes.
And mind you, he may have gray, but he's still young, y'all. Okay. So to have been married for almost 40 years, that is like when my husband and I heard that, we were like, that's the kind of people we want in our space, right? We just celebrated a measly 20 years. 20. And then we thought we was doing something until we met Mark, who's not much older than me, and almost 40 years. So tell us a little bit about that. I know we talked and we shared how people always say, well, what's the secret? And what are your thoughts on longevity and how you made it? Because we can't speak for everyone, but how did you and your beautiful wife get to almost 40 years?
Well, I think that Christ, first of all, is the foundation of our relationship. And I think that because my belief system is that God created marriage. And so since God created marriage, it's designed to work. But it is also designed to work according to certain principles and precepts, right? And so I really believe that marriage is God's idea, marriage is God's by design, and marriage is designed to work. And I live on those three premises. And I believe that, you know, if you invite God in your marriage and you're willing to allow him to actually be a part of the relationship, I think that he gives you what you need, at least the ingredients that you need for longevity and success. Marriage is work, but marriage does work. And you have to be willing to really work hard if you just really want to go the distance and be married till death do us part, right? And there will be all kinds of things that can develop in the relationship that literally can cause you to decide, I'm out, I can't do this any longer. But that's where God becomes the anchor, right? And God is able to help you through some of the most horrendous things that can happen in the relationship. And you will need his help to be able to do that. But my wife and I have been blessed to be married. January, we will have been married for 40 years. And I believe that God is the reason why we've been able to succeed. We have 2 beautiful children, 3 beautiful grandchildren, a great grandchild. And so, you know, we've been rocking for a long time. And to kind of do it till death do us part. And there are ingredients, I do believe, that has to be a part of every marriage if you're really going to experience the success of it.
And I think that is so important because so many people, they go in with, if this doesn't work, right?
Right.
And so it's not going to work if you go in with that option that you have an out, right? If you go in with, there's no out. Like, I'm not into no crime or anything, but God said death do us part. So there's no out. There was there's a show called Black Love. I'm not sure if you watched it.
I have.
But there was one of my favorite activists, DeAndre Whitfield, and his beautiful wife, Sally Richardson Whitfield. They spoke on a scenario, and he was like, "Oh gosh, she's about to tell this story again," and she told this story about there was a year where she really did not like him, right? And so we just celebrated 20, so they're at 21 years. They have one more year than we do, right? And so she said there was a year that she didn't like him. And so he said, "Babe, really? A year? That sounds horrible." But then not long after, there was a couple from Philadelphia out of Enon that was on the show as well. And the wife there said, 1 year, there's about a decade that I didn't really like him, right? And so I think there is something to understanding that there are ebbs and flows in marriages. You can fall in and out of love. You're not going to always have that butterfly in your stomach feeling. You're going to get sick of them. They're going to get sick of you. And I share this with you. My thought is that no one person is bigger than the team. When you feel that you have had it and you're ready to jump out the boot, you're sick of your spouse, they're not doing what you want, they're not giving you what you want or need, understand that they have had their crossroads with you too. Absolutely. And when you look at things that way and understand that my thoughts and feelings aren't any bigger than theirs, we just got to figure out a way to work through this. One more thing I'll add to that. At 10 years, we did a ceremony where we did a 3-strand cord while my pastor read what that means. And so when you said God is the reason, I see marriages that fail daily. And sadly, the missing component is God, right? That's what got us to 20 years. God, wrapping him in as that 3rd strand, understanding that there's no out. You can get on my nerves. I can get on. My husband even told me, "I'm not sleeping on the couch. I just want to let you know we got a big enough bed that we mad at each other. You lay on your side, and I lay on my side, but I'm not sleeping on the couch." And so we don't even do the couch thing. We sleep in the same bed every night, and I think that helps us with our marriage.
So there are some complexities though, because I believe that I don't know if you can fall in and out of love, but I certainly believe that you can not like the person you're with sometimes, right? And love them to death, but yet sometimes there are things about them you may not like. There are things about them that might rub you the wrong way. There are things about them that you didn't, bargain for, yet you still love them. And so those are some of the complexities that need to be worked through. And here's what's really interesting too, because God orchestrated marriage, because God ordained marriage, there are married folks who are experiencing more success in marriage, and they are not believers, than some believers, right? I believe that God honors the marriage relationship. I believe that there's a next level of living in marriage when you have God as the foundation. And I believe that sometimes when we come to these real crossroads moments, that threefold cord, with God being one of those cords, will be the thing that will bind you together when the difficulties of life can literally rip you apart. So when you say "I do" in front of that God's witness and all of those witnesses that you invited to your marriage, and now you're moving toward this one flesh relationship. I remember doing a counseling setting one time, and I was sharing with the couple that, that's a real thing, which is why divorce is so painful. Like when you get married to a person and the two become one, it's like trying to take some glue and gluing 2 pieces of paper together. The next day, if you come and try to take those two pieces of paper apart, there's going to be fraying and ripping, and the paper is going to tear apart, but you're not going to get those two pieces of paper apart without some damage or some pain or some fraying of the paper, right? Because then now those two pieces of paper have become merged as one. And so I truly believe that when you go into this thing, you can't go into it anticipating it might not work, because you're already starting off on a really weak foundation. You have to really have it in your mind that this is what I really mean. This is not a contract, it's a covenant till death do us part. Mm-hmm. And then no matter what, I'm going to try to make sure that I stay true to my covenant, right? And there will be those times if you end up divorcing, there's going to be a fraying, a ripping away, a tearing. It's impossible to experience a divorce without tremendous pain and tremendous trauma, right? And so that's why we have to really be able to help our couples go the distance. And that's got to be the goal of every married person who is married, that we go the distance so that we can even hand this thing off to the next generation, right? We're living in a time now where it's so easy to get divorced. And you can literally go into the relationship feeling like, well, if it doesn't work, I can just get out of it. And so you're already undermining to some degree the success of the relationship. And so you need to really, that's why premarital counseling is so important. And that's why really getting into the other person's world and knowing who they are. I need to know before I marry you, is the mob looking for you, right? I need to know before I marry you, are you bankrupt? I need to know before I marry you, do you have some mental health issues? And that doesn't mean I won't marry you, but I deserve the right to know, so that I can make a real educated decision, and so that I can definitely inquire, with God about whether you are the person that God has for me as my life's mate, and not a decision I'm making out of lust or loneliness or all the other reasons that are drawing people together.
Or need a place to stay.
Right.
There was a couple of things that came to mind. So I heard Pastor Jerry Flowers. He said people need to know what God's purpose is for their life so they can marry the mate that's best for them to go through that journey. And I thought that was very powerful. And then you spoke about something else that I think is like, I was a veteran, so I need to see tax records. I need to see your credit report. Like, we sat down with all of those things, and people thought you're extra, this, that, and the other. I'm still married 20 years after, right? Because it wasn't that I was looking for something to exclude my husband. I was looking to know let's lay it all out here. What's on your credit? What's on my credit? And we just plucked those things away before we got married so that we could start on a clean slate. We had a vision. We had a commitment, right? When you make that covenant and you commit to each other and God, it's a little easier, particularly when you go through premarital counseling. Premarital counseling, a good one, will bring out things that you didn't think of. Well, my husband and I are still pulling from our toolbox. My pastor told us, hey, if you want to move back to your hometown, that you the man, you could do that. But if your wife is not happy, you're going to block your blessings.
So I think that it's important for married couples to know, or even those who are contemplating marriage, that when you get married, you are merging two lives together.
Right.
And when you merge those two lives together, that person that you're marrying becomes the priority relationship, right? And that can create a lot of challenges because when I marry you, everything that comes with you now becomes a part of my life, whether we have children from other relationships, whether we may enter into this relationship with a lot of debt or with tax issues or whatever is in your life, and you're now marrying me, that now becomes a part of my life. And so it just makes sense to know what you're getting yourself into and who you're connecting with, because again, this thing is supposed to be till death, parts you.
Mhm.
And so I deserve to know. I need to know. It's beneficial for me to know who you are and vice versa, so that there are no surprises and that we can even maybe pre-plan as to how to deal with some of those issues that can become bigger issues if we don't decide how we're going to address them now.
Yes, not addressing them is not a good thing. This kind of leads me to a piece that I want to dive into, and that is vetting. And so you and I have had some discussions about, I'm like, I have to help these ladies vet, because they're just hooking up just to hook up, and they're falling for game that they should be able to see through. And sometimes it's asking God for his discernment, and sometimes it's a little bit of common sense, some of the things that I hear. And so you and I had kind of began to talk about attachment styles. And I thought that that was something that would be very, very helpful for those watching to understand, and maybe add to their vetting process, the knowledge of why they're choosing who they're choosing. There was a person that left a comment, Just Teb. Did the both of you know before marriage that you and your partner's relationship was God ordained? I knew that my relationship with my husband was God ordained because I had a divine experience, right? Like literally God talked to me and was like, no, you tripping. That's the one I sent for you. And I was like, oh, okay. But so you can answer that question, and then we can dive into a bit on the attachment styles.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know that different people have different mindsets or belief systems about that. As a matter of fact, my wife and I laugh about that all the time, because she truly believes that God brought us together. And sometimes I believe that, I'm not necessarily sure whether God brought us together, but he honored the decision that we made when we decided to follow his principles and his precepts. And the reason why I say that is because, again, I believe that marriage was something God orchestrated.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's something that God orchestrated, I believe that he blesses it. And God allows you, I believe that God can allow you to choose to marry who you want to marry, right? Mm-hmm. But just because you choose, here's something that's really deep, and this might mess with people, but that's just where I am. I believe that even if you choose the wrong person, God can make the wrong person the right life's mate for you.
Ooh.
I believe that. And I believe that because God ordained marriage. He orchestrated it. And so he knows how fallible we are. And he knows sometimes how impulsive we can be. And he knows sometimes that we just aren't always good at making right decisions. And he definitely knows that we may not be the kind of people who always come to him first, right? We might just impulsively make a decision. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, snap, I messed up. But marriage is probably the most important relationship on earth. Not one better than the other. But marriage is one of the relationships that God chooses to use to literally allow us to be processed and to be able to understand him, right? And so he will put us in this, he will allow us to be in this relationship, and then he will allow that relationship to process us and help us become who we should be in him. And so again, I'll say it, if we choose the wrong person, I believe that God can make the wrong person the right life's mate for you, but now you have to be willing then to follow his mandates, to utilize his ingredients, to allow him to be your Lord and Savior, right? We love the fact that Jesus is our Savior. Yeah. But oftentimes we don't allow him to be Lord. And when I say allowing him to be Lord, sometimes he might require you or even command you to do some things that you're not quite comfortable with, but because you vibe into his lordship, you're willing to do what he commands, even if it's not what you want. Amen. Right? And so if you're rolling like that, then he's going to bless you.
That's right. That's right. The safest place to be is in his will. So that kind of speaks to that kind of sentiment, right? Even if you're with the wrong person, but you do the right things and try to honor God and do what God will want you to do, he can still get the glory out of
Absolutely.
that. That is deep. That is awesome. And I believe that. I believe that. What a great response. Okay, so let's jump into some attachment style. So I'm going to keep an eye on time, and I'll let you know so I don't have a deadline, right? However, Instagram will shut us off, but it'll usually send a message, I'm told. So I'll keep an eye and I'll let you know if I say, hey, I see that, I want to shut us down. And if we have to start back, we will, but I want to make sure we save this so others can be able to see it. Okay. Sure. So let's jump into some attachment styles. I think that, the philosophy of there being a shortage of men is sometimes a catalyst for our sisters to kind of say, oh, this guy seems like he has everything I want. And they want to try to make it work and kind of ignore some flags, right? And so I think this is where the psychotherapy comes in, right? This is where people, when you are doing work to become your best self and understanding some of your triggers, some of your traumas and things of that sort, those things may be going into your decision making, where I'll just use myself as an example. I used to say I'm a jerk magnet. I didn't understand the power of the tongue at that time in my life. And so I was exactly what I proclaimed and professed to be, attracting jerks, right? But there was a part of me that was jerky. So I was attracting what I was giving, right? And so it took me to kind of do that inward work to say, you wouldn't want to date that. Like, you need to change that. And so I did some work on myself, and that kind of opened the door for God to be able to bless me to be able to receive the love that I was able to get from my husband. Yeah. So let's talk about some attachment styles. Where we want to take off?
So I love attachment styles, and you created a great segue for that when you said that you felt like you were like a jerk magnet. You were attracting all of these guys who you felt were wrong for you, so you began to do some work on yourself. I believe one of the greatest ways for us to be able to attract the right life's mate for us is to know ourselves, right? And that's where the therapeutic area comes in, because it's important for us to understand how we are wired. Right? We know that God created us in his image and in his likeness, and yet he created all of us as individuals, which is why none of us have the same DNA, right? We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are unique unto ourselves, and there's nobody like us in the world. And so that being said, we need to understand how we were wired. And I love attachment style because it's something that teaches us about ourselves, and then in turn can teach us how to maybe not waste time with dating the wrong person. So attachment style is simply this. Years ago, some therapists did some research and came up with this whole piece called attachment styles. And what attachment styles basically is that, attachment really kind of refers to this deep emotional connection that we can form with other individuals. And so, right? So if you think about it, our attachment styles pretty much develop from early relationships we've had, most times with our caregiver, that person who is responsible for caring for us, raising us, protecting us, and oftentimes that is mom and dad, right? And back when this research was being done, mainly it was considered mom was the person who kind of was at home, spent more time with children, while dad was working and trying to take care of the relationship. But as we move forward, we even began to recognize that dad had as much to play in this thing as mom. But basically what it says is that mom, or that caregiver, that person who was responsible for taking care of you and raising you, they were considered a secure attachment base for you. And so the thought is that if you grew up with parents who were attuned to you, parents who paid attention to you, parents who loved you and supported you and took care of your physical and emotional needs, there was this, even they're celebrating your kind of independence, if you will, recognizing how our children grow up. We are able to kind of recognize, one child from another in their personalities and things like that. Mm-hmm. So the concept is when your parents were raising you, when your mom was raising you, that person became your secure attachment base. And how they treated you could determine how you ended up growing up with what particular attachment style or personality style you had. Now, basically, there's 4 attachment styles. There's secure, and then there is avoidant, there is anxious, and then there's disorganized. And just real in a nutshell, a person that has a secure attachment style is a person who easy to get along with, person who doesn't get their feelings hurt real easily, a person who doesn't take things too personal all at the same time. They don't hold on to grudges. They're easygoing and easy to get along with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the person that we all long to be connected to.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are the other 3. The anxious, the person that has an anxious attachment style, that's the person that's going to be somewhat uncomfortable with certain dynamics happening in the relationship. Their main concern is feeling that their main fear, I'll say it that way, is that they're going to be abandoned by someone, right? And then so they might be the person who really needs you to text them throughout the day. They're the person who gets upset if they call you and you don't answer the call. They're the person who might always be concerned that, how are we in our relationship? Are we good? And they're always looking for validation because their anxiousness, the anxious attachment style, makes them feel like I always have to be gauging the temperature of our relationship. And if certain things are happening, it's automatically triggering that anxiousness in me. And then the person I'm connected to is going to feel that. Another style is the avoidant. The person with the avoidant attachment style, that's the person who is not great with deep levels of commitment. So they will be riding with you for a period of time, but then when you start needing more commitment, or when you start needing more intimacy, when you start needing more things, then it's going to trigger discomfort in them, and then they're going to subtly start avoiding. Right. So the more you start talking about deeper level of relationship, the more you start talking about marriage, the more you start talking about exclusivity, those kinds of things are going to trigger discomfort in them. You want intimacy, you want closeness, you want to be near to them. And so you're going to be pursuing them, and they're going to kind of be distancing themselves from you, pulling back, right? This is overwhelming for me. And so basically, folks have those 3 styles. They either have the secure style, the avoidant style, or the anxious style. There's one other called disorganized, but the person with the disorganized attachment style, that's the person who has a combination of anxious and avoidant. And oftentimes those are folks who have had a really, really challenged childhood. Maybe they have a lot of abuse and things like that in their childhood. And so their personality style can just be a combination of avoidant and anxious. So let me give you an idea of how this develops. And I know I'm talking a lot, but you can catch it with this. So let's say most of us have seen, let's say we see mom at the park with her tender age child. And the park is right next to train tracks. But the child loves the playground, right? And so when you take the child to the playground, you put the child down, there's a level of independence in that child that will cause that child to start wandering away from you, because their independence is that they want to explore the swings and they want to explore the sliding board and things like that. And you'll notice they're always looking back at mom or whoever that attachment figure is, right? So they'll be exploring, but they're always looking back just to always make sure that they feel safe and secure. And because you're their secure figure, they feel safe and secure with you. So they're exploring around, but then in the distance, you start feeling this train coming. Have you ever felt the rumblings of the train even before it gets to us, right? So the closer that train starts getting, the more rumbling is occurring. You're going to notice that child is going to start looking back at their secure attachment figure, because now they're experiencing something that's uncommon, something that they're not sure of. And then when the train really starts getting close and they get scared, the first thing they're going to do is run back to mom. Run back to dad, run back to that attachment figure. And that mom, that dad, that guardian is going to pick the child up. They're going to stroke the child. They're going to make the child feel comfortable. And then when the train goes by and the child feels calm again, you can literally put that child back down and that child is going to wander away again. And each time you do that, when they have fears, when they have concerns, when something scrambles them, every time they run back to their attachment figure and feel validated, feel safe, feel secure, they're going to develop a secure attachment base. And what they have learned from every time they run back to their guardian and have their fears allayed, they've learned two things. They learned that they are worthy of love, and they learned that they are able to give love. Now, same scenario with the person who has an anxious attachment style. They may feel the rumblings of the train, look toward their who should be their safe attachment figure, and maybe mom isn't paying attention to them. Maybe mom is not, showing them that I got you. And then when they start getting more fearful, they start running to mom, and mom or dad may not pick them up. Mom or dad may not address the fact that they're afraid. Mom or dad may not calm them down. And so what they're learning is that they have to self-soothe. I got to figure out how to make myself feel better, because every time I get fearful or afraid and I run back to my attachment figure, they don't do what I need from them. So I become anxious when different things trigger me, and I'm trying to figure out how to make myself feel better, right? The avoidant person, they get to a point where they recognize every time I go to mom or dad, when I get scared, they kind of dismiss me. They they don't address my issues at all. At least with the anxious person, sometimes mom and dad are there, sometimes they're not. With the avoidant person, they've learned nobody's there for me. So I need to just deal with myself and figure out how to make myself feel better. And they carry that into adult relationships. Feel like I learned early on, folks abandon me or aren't always there for me. So I got to figure out on my own. The anxious person learned folks are there for me sometimes, and then sometimes they're not. So I'm always worried how we are in relationship.
Are you going to be there for me?
There you are. So in a real quick note, I gave you I can't tell you how long it took to learn all of that stuff, but I gave it to you in a quick snippet. So I tried to do it justice.
You did. You did. And I think it is very important for us to unpack this, because we live now in a culture where when we turn on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever, we hear a lot of blame thrown this way, that way, this way, that way, right? And we are in an environment or in a culture or a world now where there's the whole women accountable culture, right? And so they're allegedly holding women accountable for that attachment piece, in essence, right? What was the woman's attachment to their child when they were growing up? So what I found, I had an interesting conversation with one of these whole women accountable individuals, and it was unveiled that he did not have a relationship with dad. He didn't know dad at all. And he had a horrible relationship with mom. So it's not uncommon that he is turning on his camera and spewing venom at women, because his attachment base probably was avoidance. And so he had to self-soothe himself, his way through to manhood or malehood, because everyone that reaches an adult age is not necessarily a man. But one of the things that jumped out to me when you were saying this, so when someone is looking for someone to date, are there two styles that are compatible with one another, or should individuals look to date their exact same style?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And the answer is the idea attachment style to date is the person that has a secure attachment style. The unfortunate truth is that folks who have an anxious attachment style oftentimes are attracted to a person that has an avoidant attachment style. And because the two are attracted to each other for various reasons, in the beginning, it feels great. But later on down the road, we start seeing how the differences in our attachment styles actually start working against us instead of for us. And so, listen, and here's a couple. We're going to probably just have to have just a whole setting to just really
Still
unpack
big
this because there's
more, ladies and
information, right? It is. But here's just a few keys. Number one, if knowing what your attachment style is doesn't mean it's not a negative thing at all. It's a positive thing. So if you are a person that has an anxious attachment style, don't feel like you're flawed. Don't feel like there's something wrong with you. It's just that you have an anxious attachment style and it developed from somewhere, same as the person with the avoidant. So don't feel like there's something wrong with you. And then there is a spectrum. No one is completely secure. No one is completely anxious or avoidant. But when we know what our attachment styles are, it gives us insight about ourselves. And then it gives us insight about folks who we are spending time with. Because oftentimes, if the person that has the anxious attachment style is dating a person who has an avoidant attachment style, there's a distinct possibility that those persons are going to end up wasting each other's time, because in the end, they're going to see that they're not right for each other, or they're going to get married and then in the midst of the marriage feel like something isn't working. So you really want to know what your attachment style is. And even if, because it is possible to know what your style is, and even if you're married to the person with the attachment style that doesn't vibe with yours, it can work, right? So when I do settings with singles, as I begin to teach singles what their personality or their attachment style is, then I teach them how to notice, if you will, or how to figure out what attachment style that person is they're interested in. So for example, if you connect to a person and I have an anxious attachment style, and the person that I'm interested in says things like, you hear one of the things they might say to you is, man, when I date, my relationships just don't last too long. That's a flag that might be suggesting that person has an avoidant attachment style. If you're dating that person and they say things like, you just want to be with me all the time, I need space. That might be a flag that they may have an avoidant attachment style. If the person is saying to you, I called you 8 times and you didn't answer me, that person may have an anxious attachment style, right? If they say things to you like, they get upset because you want to hang out with the boys or the girls a little bit. They want every waking moment to be with them. That might be alerting you to the fact that they have an anxious attachment style. So you begin to learn what avoidant attachment style language sounds like, what anxious attachment style language sounds like. The secure person is like, hey, listen, we all need some space to ourselves. The secure person is like, man, I called you 6 times and you didn't answer. I guess you were in a meeting. Or maybe you had your phone on vibrate, right? They're willing to give you the benefit of the doubt instead of being triggered so quickly and thinking you're up to something. Right? So
going immediate bad.
Yeah, so you can teach people this language and you can teach them things to look out for, and then it just alerts them to wanting to have deeper conversation or wanting to learn more about this skill set.
There was a great question that are attachment styles directly related to love languages? Are you familiar with the 5 love languages?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
So how would you say, if at all, they correlate, or do the two work together or against each other in any way?
I think that they're both great information, but I do believe that there are big differences in them. I think that, the love languages are things like, when we all connect to someone, like I believe, if I can remember the love languages, they were things like quality time, someone.
Quality time, acts of service.
Acts of service. One was
gifts and gifts.
Right, gift giving. So those types of things, that's like knowing what you like, what you desire, maybe even what you feel you need. Attachment style is just wired within. You
Gotcha.
can help it to a degree, right? It's something that you might not even know unless someone is teaching you about it. And these things develop over time, again, from the types of relationships you had with those guardians or parents you had and how you were treated when you were young. So you're learning things, you know, so you might develop these coping mechanisms by all of those years of being maybe not paid attention to, or not told you're great, or not people not being there for you. And so that becomes inbred in who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it begins
Mm-hmm.
to cause you to respond in relationships particular ways based on how you were shaped from the relationships you had as a young person. The love languages are things that they tend to even change in time. So I might have one of my primary love language might be acts of service, which is one of the love languages, right? 10 years later, acts of service may not be my primary love language. It may have gone back to my secondary love language.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of attachment styles, they can be altered and adjusted a little, but a lot of times they are what they are. And, you know, you being aware of them allows you to now maybe balance them or manage them better. But oftentimes they tend to stay as they are. They often don't change much.
Yes, so that the question was, the attachment styles don't change. So he just answered that attachment styles don't change much. They could be altered a bit, but the love languages, they could change a bit more because you're growing and you're turning into a new person every day. For some of us, I taught my daughter, you are a young lady and you're allowed to change your mind, and she takes advantage of that every chance she gets. Speaking of my daughter, there's a lot. Many know that I just sent my baby girl off to college, or we just sent my baby girl off to college. And for those that put stuff in the comments about how beautiful I am, thank you. I really appreciate it. But I am not available either. So please do not slide in my inbox with calling me gorgeous, because that's what my husband calls me. He calls me gorgeous. Okay.
Right.
So let's just set that record straight. But thank you for the compliments. I appreciate it. In today's world, parenting is tough. And so I want to shift gears a bit and talk about our relationships with our children. I was reading a post the other day, and it spoke about parents. It's time to start checking and making sure that there are no weapons, or whatever the case may be. It's time to parent a little more up close. And there was a very polarized comment thread where people felt, well, that's why your kids are they're going to leave home and never want to be bothered with you, because you guys are checking their stuff. They deserve privacy. And I raised my hand and say, mine is 19, right? And that was one of the things they said, you guys need to take phones and check rooms. Mm-hmm. And I said, if in fact she's under my roof, I pay the phone bill, so we have Life 360 on her phone. We know where she is. That's one thing that a lot of parents don't know, where the kids are. But the other thing is, I firmly believe if I pay the bill, then I have the right to check it whenever I want to. And if you moving funny, then that's prompting enough to check your phone. And so tell me what your thoughts are, particularly coming from a space where you were in law enforcement. You see a lot more than we see on TV, right? You have seen a lot more, but you are also, and he's not your traditional law enforcement officer, ladies and gents. I told you we worked in racial equity work together. So that is polarizing in and of itself. You know, some people love police officers, some people don't. But in today's times, with all that's going on, what can you offer to viewers as a form of hope and or some guidance to how to parent in today's times, particularly the tweens and teens? There's not a lot of supervision. They're clearly they're raising themselves. We were latchkey kids and things of that sort, but it's different now. So share a little on what you think can offer some inspiration to parents parenting in today's times. I want to add one more thing. There was a video circulating of about 10 to 12 kids. All of them had guns. The youngest looked to be about 7 or 8. And the oldest maybe 15 or 16. But all of them had guns pointing in at the camera. And it's on social media. Their faces are shown and everything. And these are things that are going unnoticed, it seems, in many households. So I have a strong belief on that, but I want to hear your perspective on that.
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Loaded.
There are various types of parenting styles, and I think that to some degree our parenting styles develop by even how we were parented, right? And we decide I'm either going to be like my parent or I'm going to make sure I'm not like my parent was.
I'm going to do that.
And what's funny about that is that as we begin to parent our children, we find ourselves having these moments where it gives us flashbacks of when we were children being parented, right? And you find yourself doing or saying some of the same things that your parents were not.
I want to be like her. Then you got to call down and say, thank you.
Yeah, that's so funny. But listen, I think that, so parenting has always been complex. I don't know that there's ever been a time in history where parenting was easy. I do believe that there have been times in history where parenting has been different. And right now we're living in a time where parenting may be more complex than it's ever been because our children have access to spaces and people that normally they would not have had. And people have access to our children, even when we do everything we can do to protect them from predators and from people who can hurt and harm them. And so I think that we have to really find a balance between making sure that we are doing the best that we can in raising our children, but at the same time, not suffocating them so much to the point where we don't allow them to develop. So, the Bible says, excuse me, train up a child in the way that they should go, right? That suggests to me that children can't train themselves. They can't bring themselves up. They can't take care of themselves. And that's the job of the parent. And sometimes we are so interested in our children liking us that we put them in a position where that becomes dangerous, right? So as a parent, I'm more concerned about parenting my child properly at a particular age so that then as they grow developmentally, now I can maybe be more of a friend. So for example, the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. What your belief system is about penalizing, spanking, whatever your child, what I want you to vibe into is that it suggests spare the rod, spoil the child. So that means then there is a type of parenting, and even, I hate to use the word punishing, but there's a type of disciplining that's supposed to happen when the child is a child, right? Because by the time the child becomes a teen, certain types of discipline don't work anymore.
That's right.
Right. And so we need to be paying attention to how we are training our children, how we are disciplining our children, how we are spending time with our children. And all of that has something to do with the development of our child. So now when it comes to parenting, because we live in this time where if we're not really parenting our children properly, we can set our children up to be harmed or hurt. So your child might want to do a lot of sleepovers. Your child might want to hang out late at night. Your child might want to be a part of a certain group. It's the parent's child to protect the child, even when the child doesn't know they're being protected.
Yes.
So, for example, you might really need to find out before you give permission for your child to do a sleepover. I need to know who these parents are. I need to know what happens in that environment. I even need to know who's coming and going, because the parents may be great parents, but you still might be allowing your children, other people, to have access to your children who may not be the kind of parents those parents are who are hosting, right? So your child is at a sleepover, and then those parents' son brings his friends over, and
Yep.
some of those friends might have issues, and then we have subjected our children to dangerous situations. So here's one thing I want to say. Don't be concerned that your child is going to hate you or dislike you because you parent them. That's a part of just development and teen years. And we've all been to that place where we were the crazy teen, right? We were too old to appreciate hugs and kisses anymore, but we're not old enough to really take care of ourselves, right? That's the time where teens are just crazy. They don't know what they want. They want to be hugged, but they don't want to be hugged. They want to be kissed, but they don't want to be kissed. They want attention, but they don't want attention. And that's where you have to be parenting them, right? To understand that sometimes their behaviors and their words really don't always give a true representation of what they want. I believe that most children still appreciate some level of discipline, some level of structure, some level of boundaries. I believe that they want that and they need that, even though it doesn't always feel cool.
Mm-hmm.
So they appreciate the boundary when they don't want to go to this particular situation because they know a whole lot of drama is going to be there and my mom said no.
Yeah.
They appreciate that because they can save face, right?
Yeah.
But flip side is I really want to be a part of that party because certain people that I like really are going to be there. And then when you say no, trying to look out for them, then they're not going to like that.
Yes.
So their feelings fluctuate. They can't always trust and depend on their feelings and that's where the parenting skills come in. You need to know who your child is talking to at 2 a.m. on a cell phone, right? You need to know what's in that child's bag sometimes. You need to know what's in the drawer. You need to know where they are, what they're going. So maybe their phone needs to really have tracking or something because it's about safety. While you're having conversation, though, don't be the parent who's suffocating because the Bible says, fathers, provoke not your child to wrath, right? There is a way that we can be so overbearing that we can trigger our children rebelling. But if we're honest, if we're upfront, if we have open lines of communication, I want my daughter or my son to tell me they want to have sex, that they're having urges, as opposed to me being the parent who so puts it down that my kids have deduced that I'm not a good person to come to. So they're talking to their friend's parent. I'd rather deal with the discomfort of it and still be honest with it. And they feel like they can come to me and talk about anything than for the child who says, I can't talk to my parents about anything. They're too holy. They're too righteous. They're too, indulgent in criticism or judgmentalism or whatever. They're not going to come to me and they may go to the wrong person and get the wrong information. So I think that parenting really has to be balanced. We have to recognize that there are some things our kids are not going to talk to us about because they're more loyal to their age group at a certain age than they are to adults. Then there are other children who are at a certain age where mom and dad is hero. And if you take advantage of that, they're coming to you with everything so that when they develop as ready, like your child, as they're now going to school or whatever, they receive this balanced approach to parenting so they feel comfortable coming to you about things, even if they might feel like you're not really going to be cool with it. They still trust you enough to come with it, but they also recognize you've prepared them.
Yes, and I think that is so important. I learned a couple things about myself. I only pushed out one, but I have 3 total. And I learned that I parented from a place of fear. And that was a tough realization for me. Like, I trust God. And so how and at what point did things shift where I parented from such a place of fear, right? And so I was the helicopter parent that hovered and all of that. But I'm pleased to report that she is a freshman in college. She has called us with several scenario. Mom, what do you think about this? Her friends even said, ask your mom what she thinks I should do about my nasty roommate. I'm like, you got a nasty roommate, tell her what you did. So it shifts once they get to a certain age because now I'm a consultant to her, right? But she understands. So she's kind of like tested the waters. Like, you know, when I come home, I'm grown now. So no. Dad and I are like, no. Age alone doesn't make you grown.
Yeah.
When you live here, you have some rules and whatever. And initially, I can't wait to get out of here. I can't wait. I'm not coming home. She said, Mom, I wanted to come home this week because I didn't have classes. And then I said, no, I'm just gonna wait till Thanksgiving. I'm in the bathroom cleaning. She's like, oh, the bathroom. I miss home. You know, so
Yeah.
parenting up close is not easy. My daughter, knowing what I do here and trying to encourage other women, I was speaking for my sister Cola is here. She has a page. My smile has a story to tell. Sorry about that. You still there?
I'm there.
So my smile has a story to tell. She asked me to bless her page and drop the mic. And I asked my daughter, what do you think I should speak about? And surprisingly, this is before she left for college, she said parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, really? She said, yeah, Mom, you're an excellent parent. I just hate when you tell me no. And I thought that was very self-aware of her. But it really felt good to know that. And she said, you could have taken the easy way out. And you didn't. Mm. And she's right. I could have taken the easy way and said, go ahead to the party when I knew that party was not something that I wanted her exposed to. I could have taken the easy way and let her watch iCarly when she's 7, 8, 9 years old, when that was just too inappropriate. You don't need to see suggestive language and the kissing and the smooching. And so we were if somebody started kissing on a TV show that we were watching, we turned the channel. Like that's just how we parented her, you know.
But
and
that goes
have to do that. Well, as she got older, we didn't need to do it anymore.
But that supports exactly what I just said, and you had never shared that with me. And so, you know, she still appreciated the boundaries. She still appreciated the structure. She still appreciated those times when you said no, even though she may not have liked it. She still appreciated it. And now you get to hear her say, you know, teach about parenting. That's her saying, I appreciated the parenting you did for me. And I recognize now what I couldn't recognize then. And that's the point I want us as parents to recognize. Our children don't always understand why sometimes we have to parent the way we parent. But in time, they begin to learn as they get older, and their brains and their minds are able to actually process it on a deeper level. And so I applaud you. I congratulate you for, you know, how you parented your child, and you now get the return on your investment. Where
I get to see it a little bit. I get to hear her say, like, I get to hear her tell her roommates, no, I will not live in a nasty bathroom. When she fussed when I made her scrub the bathroom, but listen, we ladies don't do nasty bathrooms. Okay, one more thing before we shut down, before Instagram alerts us. This is on relationships with siblings, right? You gave me such phenomenal feedback. Many know that I was caregiver for my mom, and I have siblings and I was left to do that by myself, right? And Mom used to always say my brother was her favorite. So that was tough. Like, bro, like, how you not show up for me? And while my brother preceded my mom in death, and I believe God makes no mistakes, he knew that my brother did not need to be here after my mom was gone. Like, he needed to orchestrate that the way he did.
Right.
But I remember mentioning to you how I felt a way about that. I did. I felt a way. And I've encountered people who are living that experience now. Tell them what you shared with me, please, briefly, about capacity. And it's not necessarily that someone didn't want to show up. They may not have had the capacity to, and God gave me strength in that area where everyone thought I was the squirmish baby child that she'll never be able, but I had to step up, so I did. So tell me a little bit, share a little bit about that.
I think you just nailed it in a nutshell. I think that in our families, you know, none of us wants to be in a position where we end up having to be a caregiver on a deep level, right? Where you may end up having to clean up a loved one or bathe a loved one or get, you know, deeply involved in a way that you never thought you would. All the while, that loved one may be deteriorating. They may be declining. That's hard for some folks to be able to deal with. And I think that it's important. And so sometimes that individual can be labeled as the person who's not giving as much, or they're not as concerned, or why aren't they partnering with us, or how come they're not doing their part. Sometimes it's very, very hard for certain individuals in our families, our siblings even, to maybe see our parents declining. That can create discomfort for them. It can provoke fear in them. It can cause them to just, really get so in touch with their own mortality that they can't handle it. And so if you have siblings, we have different levels of capacity. And some of us are able to, push past what we thought we could do to do what we need to do. Others of us, for some reason, just can't find the capacity to do that. So they may be the person that doesn't show up at the hospital as often as we thought. They may be the person who doesn't lend to shave a loved one or to bathe a loved one. They may be the person who seemingly always has an excuse for why they can't lend. Sometimes it may look like that on the exterior, but internally, they just might not be able to handle watching someone they love so much not be the person that they're used to seeing. Maybe this person is a shell of who they used to be, and that's overwhelming for that person and just the type of person they've become. So it's easier maybe to not see that person in that state. So they may find all kinds of reasons why they can't, or why they didn't, or why they shouldn't. And in reality, we might just really need to recognize they're just not built like that.
That's right. That's right.
In my family, I have a pretty large family, and we all are similar in some areas, very different in other areas. And I noticed that some don't do as well visiting sick people, or seeing blood, or having to get so intimate with a person where you're bathing your parent or your sibling. They just don't have that capacity. And for me to dog them about it, they now just feel criticized. They feel judged. They feel like we're just labeling them. And that may even push them further away, instead of recognizing, okay, so what are you able to do? Maybe that person is able to get meals. Maybe that person is able to clean the home. Maybe that person is able to run errands. Maybe that person is able to do other things where they still are giving, but just not in the capacity that you may be able to give.
That is so profound. It blessed me, so I pray that it blesses you guys. I am going to stop there. Mark, I didn't even look at my notes here. Outside of introduction, I didn't look at my notes. I told you we would just flow. This is how we talk on the phone, and so we wanted to share. We letting y'all in on a group chat, okay? So please share this with those in your network. We are prayerful that this messaging will be a blessing to others, and I can say that we'll have more Wellness Wednesdays because it's necessary. It's necessary. For those who haven't already, please go follow Mark. Mark is new to social media, but he's not new to the line of work that he does. So like I introduced him, he's a psychotherapist. He is a doctorate in marriage and family therapy. He also is a retired police officer. He is a retired veteran. He has a spirit of serving, and he's a pastor. So please go and follow Mark. Mark, you're going to get some new friend requests. Go ahead and look out for them and let them in. But thank you all for watching. Thank you for sharing. I pray that this blesses you. As you know, I always close with be kind to one another. You never, 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 you may never know what someone else may be going through. Peace and blessings. Thank you, Mark. It was great. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yes, I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.